My husband left me in labor at a gas stop, then went to the mountains with his parents. He said fresh air would help. I said my water just broke. He still drove away. No panic. No guilt. Just left. They packed hiking gear. I packed a hospital bag. He chose the trip. I chose to survive. And someone else showed up when he didn't. I still hear the sound of gravel crunching under his tires. The way he slammed the trunk shut. Dropped my suitcase on the curb like it meant nothing. Like I meant nothing. My hands were shaking. My dress was soaked. I could barely stand. He just looked at me like I ruined his weekend. No panic in his voice. No guilt in his eyes. Just that flat, irritated tone, call someone. Then he drove off. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't just in labor. I was alone. Abandoned. Not by accident. By choice. He left me. And I wouldn't forget that. Not in the ambulance. Not in the delivery room. Not ever. Because that moment didn't break me. It woke me up. They say you don't really know a person until you go through something life-changing together. I used to think that was just a saying. Something people said after a breakup or a bad fight. But now I know it's painfully true. When I met Derek, he was calm, well-spoken, and always seemed in control. He wasn't loud or flashy like the other guys I dated. He was measured. Like nothing rattled him. That used to make me feel safe. We dated for about a year before he proposed. There was no grand gesture, no kneeling in public or fireworks, just Derek, standing in our little apartment, holding out a ring and saying, "Let's do life together." And at the time, that sounded perfect to me. Simple. Certain. His parents, especially his mom, Claire, weren't thrilled. Claire had a way of sizing people up without saying a word, one glance, and you already knew you weren't good enough. She was tall, elegant, with the kind of polished smile that felt like a warning more than a welcome. She didn't say anything cruel to my face, not at first. But the message was clear. I wasn't who she pictured for her son. And over time, she stopped pretending to hide it. Still, Derek defended me at the beginning. He used to say, "Don't mind her. She's just old school." Or, "You know how my mom is, she'll come around." But she never did. And slowly, Derek stopped defending me too. We got married on a rainy Saturday in April. Just a small ceremony, close friends, immediate family. Claire wore ivory, not navy, and acted like it was her big day. But I didn't let it get to me. I told myself it didn't matter, that what mattered was Derek and I. Our first 2 years were quiet. Predictable. I taught at a local preschool. Derek worked in finance, long hours, late nights. On weekends, he often drove out to his parents' lake house for reset time, as he called it. I didn't always go. Claire said the house wasn't child-safe, even though there were no kids yet. The subtext was clear. When I got pregnant, I hoped it would bring us closer. I imagined Derek getting excited, talking to my belly, planning names, building cribs. Instead, he barely looked up from his laptop. His reaction was flat, "Okay. That's big news." That was it. The further along I got, the more detached he became. At first, I thought maybe he was scared, overwhelmed. So I gave him space. I read books, took prenatal classes, built the nursery myself, piece by piece. He never offered to help. One evening, I was 8 months along, dragging a bag of groceries up the steps. I had swelling in my feet, my back was killing me, and I nearly slipped. When I walked inside, Derek didn't even glance up from the TV. I asked him, just asked, if he could maybe help with the bags next time. He looked at me like I'd offended him. "You're the one home all day. You need the exercise." I wanted to scream, but I didn't, because every time I tried to speak up, he'd call me hormonal. Too sensitive. Or worse, just like my mom said you'd be. That one cut deep. From then on, I started shrinking myself. I'd prepare his breakfast quietly, fold laundry in silence, let him vent about work while my own thoughts stayed buried. I stopped asking for help, stopped sharing what I was feeling. And deep down, I started wondering, did I marry someone who only knew how to love the version of me that didn't need anything? Because the more I needed him, the more invisible I became. Then came the trip. Claire's birthday weekend. Derek said we were going to the mountains for fresh air, family time, and a reset. I was 38 weeks pregnant. I said I wasn't comfortable going that far. He said I was being negative. Dramatic. His exact words? "You'll be fine. You always are." I didn't fight. I just packed my hospital bag and quietly prayed I wouldn't need it yet. I had no idea I'd be unpacking it alone. The closer we got to Claire's birthday trip, the colder Derek became. He barely spoke to me at home. When he did, it was clipped. Flat. No warmth. No concern. Just orders. Reminders. Don't forget to pack extra socks. Mom hates when we're late. It wasn't, "Are you okay?" or "Do you feel up for this?" Never that. The night before the trip, I stood in the nursery folding tiny onesies. My back hurt. My ankles were swollen. But Derek walked past the door like it didn't exist. Like I didn't exist. When I asked if we could maybe delay the trip a week just to stay close to the hospital, he didn't even look up from his phone. "We already said we're going. Don't start being difficult now." Difficult. That word stayed with me. As if being cautious, heavily pregnant, and exhausted made me a burden. Claire called that same night. I could hear her voice through the speaker. "Make sure she brings something decent to wear. My friends will be there, and I don't want her looking like, well, you know." He laughed. He laughed. I was in the kitchen, standing by the sink with my hands in dishwater. I felt hot tears welling, but I didn't let them fall. Instead, I finished washing the dishes in silence. Then I went to bed alone. The next morning, Derek sat at the table scrolling through his phone while I reheated leftovers for breakfast. I didn't feel like eating. I could barely breathe with how tight my stomach was getting these days. But I made the effort. He looked at the plate and raised an eyebrow. "You reheated soup again? My mom made lasagna last night. I bet she even packed some for us." There it was again. That constant comparison. Claire this. Claire that. He always used her like a measuring stick. And I always came up short. When I asked him quietly, almost afraid to speak, if he could help carry the bags to the car, he let out a long sigh. "I've been working all week, Amelia. Can you not make this a thing?" So I didn't say anything else. I carried the bags myself, packed the snacks, loaded the trunk. He watched from the couch. As we pulled out of the driveway, I looked back at our little house. The nursery light was still on. I had a weird feeling in my chest. Not fear, something worse. Like I already knew I'd be coming back different. We drove for about an hour through winding back roads. Trees all around. No reception. He played music on the radio and hummed along like nothing was wrong. Meanwhile, I sat silently, trying to ignore the pressure building low in my belly. I shifted in my seat. Something felt off. Then a warm trickle. Then a rush. I looked down. My dress was soaked. I turned to him, panic rising in my throat. "Derek, I think my water just broke." He looked over. Frowned. "You're kidding, right?" When I didn't answer, he scowled. "Seriously? Right now?" I nodded, clutching my stomach. Instead of turning the car around, he pulled off at the next gas stop. Parked. Got out. And then he opened my door and said the words that would change everything. "Get out. I'm not letting you ruin this trip." I stared at him, thinking maybe I'd heard wrong. But he wasn't joking. He leaned in, reached for the seatbelt, and unclicked it like I was just some passenger he wanted gone. "Seriously, Amelia," he muttered. "Get out. I can't let this car smell like hospital. You'll be fine." I looked down, my dress soaked through. The passenger seat too. And all I could think was, this is happening. It's really happening. I clutched my belly, the pressure building now. "Derek, I need to get to a hospital. Please." He stepped back. "Call someone. I have no service here, but maybe you do." I reached for my phone, hands trembling so badly I could barely type. There was barely one bar. I tried 911. It rang. While I waited, Derek walked to the trunk, pulled out my suitcase, and dropped it beside the gas pump. Like it was luggage he didn't feel like dealing with. "I told my parents we'd be there before lunch," he said without even looking at me. "Don't make this bigger than it needs to be." And then, he got in the car, started the engine, and drove off. I stood there, on the edge of that cracked parking lot, my water broken, heart pounding, trying to breathe through the first real contraction. It felt like fire slicing through my spine. The 911 operator answered, asked my location. I gave it as best I could. Then a voice, one I didn't expect, called out. "Amelia?" I turned. It was Rachel, our neighbor from 3 houses down. She'd been passing through on her way to visit her sister. And she saw me. She rushed over, helped me into her car, buckled my seatbelt with the gentleness Derek never could muster, held my hand as I winced in pain. "I've got you," she whispered. "You're not alone." And for the first time in hours, maybe weeks, I believed her. Rachel didn't ask a lot of questions. She didn't need to. She just drove, fast, steady, one hand on the wheel, the other gently resting on my arm as I breathed through another contraction. Her presence was calm, kind, and in that moment, it was everything. When we got to the hospital, nurses rushed out with a wheelchair. Rachel explained the situation while I could barely speak. All I remember is her saying, "She's full term. Her water broke. Her husband left her at a gas station. No one questioned her. No one needed to. The next few hours were a blur of monitors, voices, and pain. But when it was over, I held a tiny, perfect baby girl in my arms. 10 fingers, 10 toes, soft cries, and warm skin. I named her Ivy, because she survived. So did I. Rachel stayed by my side the whole night, brought me water, called my parents, held Ivy when I couldn't. She even tucked my hospital bag beside the bed, yes, the same one Derek made me carry alone. At one point, she sat beside me and said quietly, "There's something you should know." She reached into her purse and pulled out a flash drive. My dashcam caught everything from the moment he made you get out to the second he drove off. I stared at it, stunned. There's also footage from the hospital entrance. I talked to the front desk. "They're saving a copy for you." I didn't even know what to say. But Rachel wasn't finished. "Look," she said, voice steady, "I'm not saying you need to do anything right now. But if you ever want to take action, I'll testify." I saw it all. My eyes burned, but I didn't cry. Not this time. The next day, my parents arrived. We hadn't been close in years, especially since I married Derek. They didn't approve of him. And now, I understood why. My mom walked in and just collapsed into tears at the sight of me. My dad, normally composed and quiet, looked like he hadn't slept in days. He sat by my bed and whispered, "I'm so sorry we weren't there sooner." I shook my head. "No. I chose this. But I won't keep choosing it." Those words felt like a vow. Not just to them, but to myself. That afternoon, a nurse slipped into the room holding a small envelope. Inside, a printed photo and a copy of the security footage. The image showed me being wheeled into the ER, drenched, pale, clutching my stomach while Rachel hovered protectively. I stared at that image for a long time. It wasn't dramatic. It was real, undeniable, and it told the truth better than I ever could. 3 days later, I was discharged. Ivy bundled in a soft pink blanket, her tiny fists curled near her chin. My parents had cleared a room at their house for us. It was quiet, filled with warm sunlight and the smell of fresh linen. For the first time in what felt like forever, I slept without fear. But Derek hadn't gone silent. Missed calls, voicemails, texts that ranged from, "Are you okay?" to, "You're overreacting." Then, "You better not make this public." He didn't ask about Ivy. Not once. I didn't reply. I forwarded everything to Rachel. She sent back a single message. "Save it all. You'll need it." And deep down, I knew she was right. Because something in me had changed. Not just because I'd become a mother, but because I'd been abandoned, humiliated, and still stood back up. Derek might have left me at that gas station. But he also left behind the last illusion I had about who he really was. The video leaked 2 days after I got home. At first, I didn't even know. My phone was off. My parents wanted me to rest. But Rachel came by, holding her phone with a look I hadn't seen before. "It's out," she said quietly. "The dashcam footage. Someone posted it online." She showed me the clip. It was grainy but clear enough, me, standing by the curb, soaked in amniotic fluid, doubled over in pain. Derek slamming the trunk, dropping my suitcase, then driving off without even glancing back. No names. No faces. But someone in the comments recognized the license plate. Then someone else identified the gas station. And just like that, it went viral. Within 48 hours, there were over 2 million views. The internet had a name for him. The husband who left her in labor. People dug up old photos. His LinkedIn. His company bio. Even his wedding announcement. And then came the fallout. Rachel's husband worked in corporate law. He heard from a friend that Derek had been placed on immediate leave. By the end of the week, his company released a statement. "We do not condone behavior that endangers the well-being of others, especially family." His contract was terminated. Claire, his mother, tried to do damage control. But it backfired. Neighbors spoke out, said they'd heard her yelling at me during visits. An old acquaintance came forward, claiming she did the same to Derek's ex years ago. Someone even started a boycott of the family's bakery. It shut down temporarily due to personal matters. Derek texted again. "You ruined my career over one mistake. Then, you should have just stayed quiet." But I didn't respond. Not with words. Instead, I met with a lawyer. Clara Weston. Sharp. Composed. She reviewed the footage, the texts, the voicemails. And all she said was, "We have enough. Let's begin." Clara didn't waste time. Within a week, she filed for divorce on my behalf. Full custody. Child support based on Derek's previous income. Every piece of evidence was organized. Texts, voicemails, hospital records, video footage. When Derek was served, he lost it. He called my parents' house. Left 6 voicemails in a row. The first was pleading. The rest were angry. You can't divorce me over one mistake. You're turning my child against me. You're not even working. How do you expect to survive without me? I didn't answer. Clara told me not to. Instead, we recorded everything. Even the silence became part of our case. Derek refused to sign the papers. But that didn't stop us. Clara petitioned the court for a summons. He had no choice but to show up. At the hearing, he came in looking like a man unraveling. Unshaven. Agitated. No lawyer. Just a stack of papers held together with a rubber band. He tried to paint me as irrational. Overdramatic. Said I was weaponizing motherhood. Clara stayed calm. She pulled out her tablet. Played the clip of Derek leaving me at the gas stop while I was in active labor. Then she read aloud his message. You should have just stayed quiet. The courtroom was silent. The judge asked Derek one question. Do you consider this the behavior of a responsible husband and father? He didn't answer. A week later, the court finalized the divorce. I was granted full custody of Ivy. Derek was ordered to pay support based on assets accumulated before his termination. At first, he claimed he had nothing left. But Clara filed a motion to access his financial records. Turns out, he'd hidden a severance bonus in a separate account. The court froze it. I didn't want revenge. I wanted security for my daughter, for myself. And I finally had it. That night, I stood on my parents' porch, holding Ivy in my arms. The wind was soft, the world quiet. And I whispered, from now on, no one walks away from you, baby girl. Not ever again. A few weeks after the court ruling, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside was a folded sheet of stationery and handwriting I didn't recognize at first. But the signatures stopped me cold. Claire Holloway, Derek's mother. She didn't beg. She didn't deny. She wrote. I was wrong. I raised my son to value appearances over people. I thought I was protecting him. I see now I failed both of you. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel angry. Just tired. I placed the letter in a drawer and closed it. Forgiveness might come someday. But forgetting? That wasn't part of the deal. Rachel kept visiting. She brought fresh fruit, baby clothes, books. Sometimes she stayed for tea. Sometimes she just sat quietly on the porch with me while Ivy napped. One afternoon, she mentioned her younger brother, Evan. He's been through a lot too, she said, handing me a jar of homemade soup. But he knows how to listen. I smiled politely, not ready for anything beyond stillness. But when Evan stopped by a week later to fix a broken porch light, I noticed how gently he moved. How softly he spoke to Ivy, even though she couldn't yet speak back. He didn't ask questions. Didn't pry. Just helped. Just showed up. And somehow, that was everything. We started talking, just small things. Books. Music. Old memories. He never once asked about Derek. But I told him anyway. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to. He just listened. Quiet, steady, safe. One evening, as the sun set behind the trees, Evan handed me a small wooden bracelet. Carved into it were two names, Amelia and Ivy. I don't know where I fit into your story, he said, but I'd be honored just to walk beside you. I didn't answer right away. I looked down at Ivy asleep in my arms, then back at Evan. And for the first time since everything fell apart, I felt ready to begin again. Not because I needed someone to save me, but because I'd finally saved myself.